Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny Committee of Melton Borough Council. As you know, I need to go through a few things before we commence the business. Members are reminded that we'll be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate when they want to speak, and to use their microphones when speaking. For the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light shows. Please switch mobile phones to silent. Should you need to leave the room during the meeting, unless it's an emergency situation, when emergency evacuation, when emergency exit should be used, please use the marked exit and entrance. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who may require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record, or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. Okay, I'll now move on to the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have in front of me apologies from councillors Atherton, Child, Webster and Evans. I believe other than that, everybody's here. Yeah, great. Yeah. I should also advise you that the portfolio holder for customers, communities and neighbourhoods, Councillor Pat Cumbers, was invited to attend, but is unwell and has sent her apologies. She does actually sound pretty grim, so I think we'll all be happy she's not brought her germs here for us all to share this evening. I'd also like to take the opportunity to welcome Inspector Darren Richardson and excuse me, and Safer Communities representative Aisha Rahman, excuse me again, John Paul and Amelia Bailey, who have joined us for the crime and disorder agenda item. And the next item is the minutes of the last meeting. Could I have a proposer to accept the minute? You can raise a question as to accuracy of the minutes. Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah, where it says that I'm a council tenant, can you add but advised that I can participate? I would like that on. And also to do with the cattle market, I said that it's also to do with the cattle market because I'm on the planning committee, but I've been told that it's okay because it's nothing to do with what's coming up on the planning committee, so I'm fine. If I could just add those two, please, thank you. Yeah,
I'm sure we can. That was to do with your declarations of interest at the last meeting. Yeah.
It on, so, but I did say it. Yeah, thank you.
Oh. Sorry, are there any other questions as to accuracy? Okay, so could I have a move of that the minutes be accepted?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose the minutes.
Councillor Thwaites and Councillor Sharp seconded. Thank you. Can we now move on to declarations of interest? And I invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. You should note a member with a personal interest must declare the interest at the beginning of the meeting, but can take part in the debate. If you have a disclosable pecuniary interest or a pecuniary interest has, oh, I'm struggling with my words tonight, or a pecuniary interest has to declare it and cannot take part in the debate and should leave the room during the debate on that item. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, item number 4 is the review of the forward plan. You have in your paperwork, or the paperwork circulated for the meeting, the forward plan, and you're invited, if you wish, to identify any relevant items for inclusion in the scrutiny work programme or to request further information. I'll take silence as no one has anything to raise. Thank you. Item number 5, review of the scrutiny work programme 2023-24. Now, again, the opportunity is here. It's, as you know, it's a standard item on the agenda to review and comment upon the attached work scrutiny programme for 23-24. Does anyone wish to raise anything here tonight? Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to item number 6, which is the main item of business tonight, which is the report which has been circulated on crime and disorder. Just to remind the committee that it's a particular responsibility of scrutiny to have an oversight over crime and disorder issues. I would like to remind you before we receive the report and the presentation with the report that whilst it sometimes is understandable that we slip into talking about particular issues that may have arisen in our various wards, it's important that we actually don't discuss or disclose details of individual cases which may be currently under consideration and investigation, and indeed may be under police investigation, and it's important we don't engage in any debate that may compromise that. The item will commence with a presentation. Aisha Rahman's going to introduce the report and give us a presentation. And in that presentation, the following topics will be considered as part of the item. The impact of the team restructure and the difference this has made, partnership working and collaboration, including an introduction to the new police inspector for Melton, Darren Richardson, current and future funding opportunities, community cohesion and engagement, and strategy and key performance indicators. So we've got quite a number of important issues in front of us here tonight, and I hope we'll take the opportunity to be thorough in our consideration of these matters in our report back to Cabinet. So I'd now like to pass over to Aisha, who's going to give us the initial presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Right, so yeah, I'm just going to be going through the presentation today, which is basically a summary of the main report that members will have received. As the Chair mentioned earlier, under the Police and Justice Act 2006, we are, as a local authority, are required to have a designated crime and disorder committee, and the Council Scrutiny Committee is our designated committee for this. So as part of this, you receive an updated, an annual update report for you to be able to discharge the responsibility. The Chair has referred to the main 5 themes of the report. So the themes were chosen: the impact of team restructure and the difference this has made. It's a fairly new team that's in place. And there's been quite a few changes in the structure and the remits. Partnership working and collaboration, and including an introduction, as they say, to the new inspector, which we will bring in. We've had a really positive relationship with the previous inspector, and we're really confident of this continuing moving forward as well. As well as the team changes in structure, we've had some very significant changes in funding structure as well. So that third theme is around funding opportunities, current and future. Community cohesion and engagement, which is very sort of key to managing antisocial behaviour, the sort of community network as well, and then strategy, governance and key performance indicators as well, which is very reflective of the statutory nature of the role. So we have, as mentioned, we've got some officers and police representatives. I'll be introducing them and bringing them in as we go along. There will be a Q&A session at the end to answer, an opportunity to ask questions, but if you do need to ask any questions, I'll be sort of pausing after each theme to allow you to ask any burning questions that you might have at that point. And the recommendations as part of this report is that Scrutiny considers the report and provide comments for consideration by Cabinet as well. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Inspector Darren Richardson, the fairly new NPA commander for Melton and Rutland, just to give us an overview of Melton from a police perspective, and it's going to be a verbal update. Yeah.
It is. Thank you very much, and thank you for welcoming me. Old-fashioned pen and paper here, so I'll be reading off a script a little bit, so forgive me. I'll tell you a bit about myself because I think it's quite important to understand who I am and what my values are, really. So I've been with Leicestershire Police for 15 years. As Lindsay, my predecessor, probably would have said it's her dream job. This is my dream job. I did some embarrassing networking to get where I am today, but I'm really pleased. I am a local in the community as well, so what's important to the people of Melton is also very, very important to me. So I feel I'm going to be running with my heart a lot and putting a lot of effort into the job to making Melton feel and be a safer place. So that's a little bit about me. So I've kind of what I'd like to speak about tonight, I've just tied in with the priorities of the partnership. And first of all is the drugs and county lines in Melton. I'm a sort of an officer of a very traditional values. I believe in certain areas of policing, we need to look at catch and convict. It's important to look at partnership working, but we need to be dealing robustly with those people that are harming our communities. And since January the 1st this year, we've done 13 drug-related warrants in Melton. 5 of these warrants have been directly linked to county lines drug supply. And those who know a bit about county lines, you know it's a very fluid way of drug dealing. It's very difficult to detect, so we have to be sharp in how we operate. So when we get intelligence, we act on intelligence, we get the warrants as quickly as possible. We do a lot of covert work, which obviously I can't go into, and then we're also supported by the wider organisation with national intensification weeks. As a total, so bearing in mind we are quite a small town, so I think it's quite impressive that 30 people have been arrested from these warrants. A significant amount of drugs and cash have been recovered, and then we've got some that are on bail and awaiting charging decisions at the moment. We also have drug testing in custody as well. So we do recognise, especially with county lines, that actually it's the vulnerable people, the drug users themselves, who are being coerced and forced into dealing drugs, and meaning that the people that are actually running the operations are sat in the background with no risk to their own liberty. So when they go into custody, we have an approach of we'll test them for opiates, and if they test positive, we can put them on rehabilitation programs. These are supported by the law, so if they fail to comply with the programs, they can be prosecuted for it. So it's just a way of just pushing them into these substance abuse rehabilitation schemes. As I say, county lines is about partnership working because it's about safeguarding as well. It's not just about catching drug dealers. It's about protecting those people most vulnerable and the practice of cuckooing, and just making sure that as a partnership we look after those. And what we've done as well as a part of these warrants, and in collaboration with Melton Borough Council, we've issued Section 8 warnings at these addresses, and those warnings basically state that if they continue to drug deal, there'll be severe penalties for it. As I say, it's very fluid, quite often changing locations on a daily basis, and I'm confident over the next year that these figures will improve. I'm confident that we're going to get into more houses, recover more drugs, and arrest people. We've got a very good proactive team that I work very closely with, and again, we'll be working with the partners just to ensure we get the optimum results out of them. So that's county lines and drugs. Then also around ASB and environmental crime as well. So ASB has been a particularly people have been quite vocal towards me with the ASB over the last few weeks. It's been noted. It's been quite impactful. We have an operation that's been running for quite a while now called Ops Sampan, which is a police-led operation where we target hotspots of ASB. The first thing I've done is taken a look at this operation. I don't think it feels really effective to me, and I prefer to go with a more sort of problem management based approach, and we just look at an evidence-based approach as well. So just putting police officers out in locations where we think antisocial behaviour is going to occur is just going to displace it. It's not going to stop it. And this is where the real partnership working needs to come in. And we've already had some really positive discussions on how we're going to approach it. This is very relevant if you follow social media and local news as well. So over the last couple of days, there's been some significant developments in this area. So this is quite timely to be able to say this. Yesterday, due to a bit of a spike in antisocial behaviour and low-level criminality, I authorised what's called a Section 35 order, which basically creates a dispersal zone in areas of high level of antisocial behaviour. A bit impactive connected to the school half term, we'd had a significant rise in antisocial behaviour, and our officers, despite their best efforts, were struggling with the standard powers to disperse with the people involved. So we was able to put the order in place. It runs till 8 o'clock this evening. And I'm not aware of one being put in place in recent years in Melton, so it was quite a radical move, but it was needed because we'd had some significant incidents in the retail outlets around Melton, which was impacting the communities as well. We've been able to, there's about a group of 10 or 15 individuals. We've been able to give dispersal orders to 8 of them. Unfortunately, one of them failed to disperse as requested and was subsequently arrested and charged, and will be appearing in court. We do not want to be criminalising young people. That's not the approach we want. These are people that we've already previously worked with. It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction, and sadly, despite our best advice and support yesterday, one young person made the wrong decisions and they paid the consequences of it. But what it does do, it does show that we'll have different approaches. We'll look at what we can do. We could look at diversionary schemes and supporting them through the schools and the partnership. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're going to commit criminal offences and if you're going to refuse to comply and cause alarm and distress to other people, then you're likely to face the consequences. And that's pretty much the way that we'll continue to police as well. I'm hoping I don't need to put another one of these orders in place in the near future. But it's a tool that we've got, and the follow-up plans to what we've done yesterday and today is to work closely as a partnership to make sure that the individuals we know about, that we can support them through the tenancy, through social services and through the schools, to make sure that we can see if we can make them make the right decisions. All a little bit wordy, I'm reading too much. Rural crime, this is a very positive area. This has been a weak point for Leicestershire Police. It's always been what feels like an urban police force, and we've got neighbouring counties that policed rurally a lot better than we did. One of the Police and Crime Commissioner's priorities was rural crime and supporting those who live in rural areas who feel very isolated from communities. And so we've created the rural crime team, and Melton's really benefited from this because we've got 2 rural crime officers and a vehicle that's fit for purpose as well. It sounds very insignificant, but we had it in the past where we're going to deal with hare coursing or offences where farmers have been targeted with plants, and we're turning up in Vauxhall Astras and getting stuck on muddy driveways, let alone being able to get into fields and pursue the offenders. So they have a 4x4 vehicle. They are trained around wildlife, around the hunts, because obviously that's prevalent around here as well. And their engagement levels are quite impressive as well with the rural communities. Just to reel a few figures out, unfortunately, I don't have any specific to Melton, so I'm going to give you some Leicestershire and Rutland data. But they've conducted over 1,100 community engagements in farms and other rural businesses, averaging 100 visits per month. These engagement visits aim to increase visibility, improve confidence and satisfaction, offer advice, offer neighbourhood link sign-ups as well. We have been delivering training to all our call takers. So when call comes into our main call taking office, which is based at our head office in Enderby, the call takers have had some advice and training around how we deal with rural crime. There was a point where if someone was reporting hair coursing, the likelihood is the call taker who was based in the city and probably lived in the city had no idea what hair coursing is, and that we've rectified that now for some better training. There's been in the last 3-month period compared year on year, there's been a 53% reduction in rural crime. Recently, 6 men from Newark were arrested in May for conspiracy to burgle and conspiracy to commit theft. They've all been remanded and since pleaded guilty and are awaiting sentence in the public domain. These were offences that we were struggling to detect before, but now we've got the trained personnel, the dedicated officers that are able to focus on these crimes. We're also using, I think it's a bit of technology, I think the young ones will tell me different, but 6 rural WhatsApp groups with thousands of participants across the county. So they're able to contact the police through WhatsApp groups if they have any suspicious activity or whether they just want some advice. And that means that we can respond quickly. And what that does as well is all our officers are in those groups. So if we don't have anyone from the rural crime team in Melton, we can deploy them from elsewhere and go and support them. They've developed over 2,500 members of a fast SMS system, which gives us an immediate way of sending out a message. So if we've had any suspicious activity or any thefts or anything relevant, we can get that message out to the rural community pretty quick. Over £1 million worth of stolen agricultural machinery and kit has been recovered in the last 18 months by the team also. They've got key links with the NFU and they have regular catch-ups. And we also have a rural quarterly newsletter, which is sent out to our key individuals, senior officers and hundreds of parish councillors, keeping them informed of the work. And we also, to wrap it all up for the rural crime team, we have 20 volunteers on horseback supporting the team across the county as well. So it's really good stuff and it's really proved that area of policing for us. On to hate crime. Hate crime has just been made a Leicestershire police priority, so a force-wide priority. The current global situation has kind of triggered that really. Hate crime in Melton, it's very low, as you can imagine, to other parts of Leicester and Leicestershire. However, it's still taken seriously. We have a hate crime spot within Melton Police, who will review any hate crime coming in and create investigation plans to ensure that the victim is updated and they get the best service we can possibly offer. And which leads me to violent crime, and then I should be finished. I'm not too sure how long I should be speaking for, actually. I'm very conscious this is the first one, so that's my excuse. Violent crime is again, it's a partnership priority, and we'll continue to work closely with statutory partners to reduce incidents of violence in Melton. Local officers have been working closely with our secondary schools to manage young people involved in incidents of violence. So Melton in the last year, a lot of the assaults that have occurred outside of domestic abuse have been with the younger people and connected to the nighttime economy. It's something we're very conscious of. The local officers are doing some incredible work with the schools, John Fernley and Longfield, just to really get in and have a real joint approach to how we can lower and reduce these incidents. The nighttime economy, I'm just looking at revamping that. So our nighttime economy is policed through as a force-wide operation. And I feel probably not enough focus on Melton, if I'm honest with you. So we've got a sort of a micro operation that's going to run alongside that. We've got funding for some officer overtime as well. So we're going to have a bit more of a presence in the town on your Friday and Saturday nights. And the good thing is it'll be local officers as well. So where the forced nighttime economy tended to be officers deployed to various parts of the county, vision areas, that we're going to be using local Melton officers that understand the communities and actually understand where places are for a start, which is always a good advantage. So hopefully that's going to provide some reassurance, and it fits into the violence against women and girls as well, because the best way we can reduce incidents where females have been targeted by certain behaviours is to actually have police officers out on the street. And it links in a lot with what Melton Borough Council have done in relation to upgrading the CCTV systems and the help points, which you're possibly going to speak about at some point anyway. And that is my update from Melton Police.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say, thanks to Darren. Do you want to wait until after your presentation for any specific questions to Darren, or?
So I was actually, I was going to open it up to say
okay.
if there's any immediate questions, but yeah.
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, it's two things. First off, I have witnessed how the police, and I know you've come together with other forces as well, how you've dealt with drug dealers in my area. And I've witnessed it twice. And I tell you what, I'm so impressed how you dealt with it. It was brilliant, really well done. And the next thing is to do with the young people. If they get cautioned, and I'm talking about young teenagers, if the, sort of the people, there's some young teenagers, for instance, as an example, at McDonald's, and things happen down there. If they get cautioned or something to that effect, because it's a shame if that happens. If you can deal with it a different way, that would be brilliant. And I'm sure you do on most occasions. But if they get cautioned, how long does it stop on their records? Because I'm a bit worried about their future, because they are young and they've got a lot of growing up to do. And I just wondered how you would deal with that.
No, that's a really, really valid question, and I think what I made a point of yesterday, and say unfortunately we did have somebody arrested. We had them charged as well, and it really is unfortunate. But that particular individual, and obviously I can't go into details, has had access to the partnership. They've had support through the schools. They've had a lot of police contact, a lot of community safety contact, housing contact. All the support has been there for them. This has been an incremental. And even last night, prior to arrest, he was given a warning. He was taken back to his home address. He still chose to come back out again. And then unfortunately, he's been charged with the offence. That's not always the necessary outcome. We can do community resolutions which sit outside of a formal police record. They're a local resolution and quite appropriate for low-level offending, but they have to admit the offence to do that, unfortunately. So I absolutely get what you're saying. And it's a very young person. You're absolutely right. They've got growing up to do, and that's why from here on in we'll be working with them to try and support them and make that, try to make them make the right decision. We can't make them make the right decision, but support them in making the right decisions.
But would it stay on their records for years, or does it stay on for life, or just for a certain amount of time because of their age? And
it depends what level. Any interaction with the police where it's led to a charge will always be documented, if that makes sense. It'll always sit there for enhanced checks in the future. It depends what the disposal is. So if they've been charged, yes, it will sit there, unfortunately. If it's a community resolution, it is literally a local police resolution, so it's not disclosable. And we don't do the cautions anymore. We do what's called a conditional caution, but usually for use, we go through the YOS process, and then normally the outcome is an out of court disposal that won't tarnish them later on in life. But as I say, I absolutely get what you're saying. The young people, they're making some poor choices now. It doesn't mean that they're not sort of savable and we can't get them to do the right things. And you're absolutely right. So we do avoid it. But on occasions, you can do as much as you like, but unfortunately, the outcome has to be that.
Any other questions? Councillor Lumley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Darren, for your presentation. Very good. Well done. Considering it's your first one, did very well. And just to say thank you as well to the police, because I know that's over the years when I've emailed certain officers, they've always replied back to me with issues, and I've raised quite a few issues in that, and it's really good how you actually all of you email councillors about the updates, like I just said about everything, and also you always hold catch-ups with councillors, the public in certain areas around the town area and the borough, which is good. I just want to just say a few comments and some questions. Number one, you know, the PCSO shift, I believe it ends at 12 midnight. It starts between 6 a.m. I think and 12 midnight. I'm just asking it because obviously, just one example in my ward, the Tesco car park at night, I've had complaints about the noise from sort of like boy races, revving engines and that. I reported it to the police for them, and they have as well. But the answer's been from officers over the years is, Simon, we haven't got the officers to actually go there after 12 a.m, between 12 and 6 a.m. So there's that part of those hours where there's no real, there like is a police presence, but it's more focused on bigger crimes, if you like, and not so much sort of like, you know, more observation. Is there any opportunities for that to be extended? I know it involves money, but are there any conversations going on at your end to try and help with that situation? That's number one. Just as well, just FYI, and I think you've touched on it. I know from what I'm hearing from a lot of people all around the whole country really, is that basically a lot of these young people now, especially like young lads, they're in these sort of like chats on group chats. So when something's going to kick off, they all group chat each other and they come out in bulk, and you're seeing this across the country with a lot of protests, not so much Melton, but certainly I'm not sure the incident last night at McDonald's and previously, I'm not sure if that's going on, where there's this big group chat going on and they all come out in force, literally leave their homes. That's a bit of an issue. Just to, if you look at sort of like social media from, if you could look at social media more, I don't know, and it's difficult, it's private, etc. But that's another focus I think we should be having a look at. Just from what's happening around the country, for example, the not just Stop Oil protesters, which are causing a huge nuisance to people that want to get to work and sort of actually go about their normal daily lives. Are our police and overall SGA police, are we actually planning for that? And have we got a plan for that in case there is a protest? Because I know at the minute they're all pretty much in the south of the country, but that could easily spread with social media up to our part of the country. Are we prepared for that? Have we got enough officers in preparation for that? Just as well, when you go on the actual Melton Police and the actual Leicestershire internet sites, if you want to report something online, I find the whole process completely over the top. It's completely long-winded. You have to go through about 15 pages just to submit the query. It's got to be cut down. I did actually raise this with your predecessor and other PCs over the years, but if there's any opportunity for that would be really good, just to make it simpler, because I've reported like the Tesco car park issue through there, and I had to do it one evening, and I just got it like 15 pages, and he kept asking the same question, but like different. If that could be cut down, that'd be really good. Just to say as well, just probably one of the bigger issues at the minute, because our prisons all around the country are almost full. I think we've got a capacity around 88,000, and I think around not 15,000 are those actually on remand, which is that's the problem with it all. 15,000 on remand. Have you prepared for criminals that literally aren't able to go to prison and are coming out of prison, and them to be looked after more without going to prison? Because I know obviously it's a concern. I think the other day we only had about 450 places across the whole country left. So, and I know there's a lot of plans going on in central government about this, but it's just a concern from a lot of people. Just finally, a really good point. I think with the whole of the Crime Stoppers phone number and the website, it's really good how you can obviously phone up and you can obviously you can report things without having to give your name or address or phone number, which is really good. Thank you.
I've got a terrible memory, so I did write all those down. So a bit of a whistle stop. Yeah, the PCSOs, you're absolutely correct. They can't work past midnight. That's a contractual thing. They are civilian staff as opposed to police officers who have no rights whatsoever. So we have Melton is a 24/7 police station. It's open 24 hours a day. It's fully staffed. Yes, it does go onto our response team after a certain time of night, and everything's prioritized on risk and demand, basically. We have some very quiet nights in Melton where not a lot happens and the officers are on general patrol. And should you report something like gathering antisocial behavior and stuff like that, we will respond very quickly. On the other hand, on the flip side, we could have a major incident, road traffic collision, etc., which can absorb all our staff in, and the response won't be as good. And that's a real honest answer. It really does depend on what demand we're dealing with. But if there is a risk there, if it's significantly impactive, we can use officers from other areas to come across. So it's quite often we'll get Loughborough officers come across or officers from the city to come and support us. So that's how it works. Unfortunately, PCSOs are actually not allowed to, and they're unison protected as well, so we can't actually allow them to work after midnight. Group chats and social media, we haven't been a victim to that this week. The group that had caused us some issues with 10 to 15 people, it never expanded as we got very sort of overt with them and started dealing with them. So I don't think that's the case, but you're absolutely right. I've seen it myself, where we can start off with a few people, one group message, and you have a crowd. It's not something I've seen in Melton so far, and I hope I don't see it, but we will deal with it accordingly. Stop oil public order demonstrations is something that we have. We have a public order unit in Leicestershire Police. And we also do what we call mutual aid as well. And it means where our public order trained officers will go and support other counties when they have demonstrations. The example with the Stop Oil is there was a refinery, I believe, in Warwickshire, and a lot of Leicestershire police officers went across public order trained to support them. Likewise here, we've had some significant public order recently where we will get the mutual aid from neighbouring forces, normally depending on the scale, or nationally, but we'll staff it to the level it needs to be safely policed, and that's how that operates really. Reporting online, yes, I agree. It is. We now have. It's a single online home, so it's not managed by Leicestershire Police. The content's not managed by Leicestershire Police. It's one online home, and you click for a few buttons, and you'll land on your relevant area. And if you're looking to report a crime, yes, there are pages. Unfortunately, the crime reports have to comply with the National Crime Recording Standards. So it'll ask for a lot of information. Granted, it's quite frustrating to key in, but is required for the recording standards. So unfortunately, you're absolutely right. Even if it's a little matter you're reporting, you do have to key it in. It is quite, I do understand the frustrations. It's not a quick process, but obviously just depending on the risk and the urgency would dictate whether you call 999, 101, or go onto the online and report it through there. Prisons, yes. Yes, they are getting very crowded, very close to capacity. We do support the prisons. We have something that's funded by the national government, the Home Office, which is called Operation Safeguard, and it's where we take a spill of the ones that can't be housed, the remand prisoners that cannot be housed, and we put them in our custody suites, providing we have capacity to do so. That's an operation that's existed for several years. We can turn it on and off at will. It would be the decision of the government. And I get what you're saying about the early releases. They are looking at releasing people early, depending, all case dependent. Obviously, we have a network of offender managers and probation to make sure that, and very close working relationships with the prisons to make sure that they're going to be safely managed and the risk is managed when they're released. Crime Stoppers, I agree, it's great. It's fantastic. And it's amazing how effective it is as well. It's really, really important. And a lot of our intelligence comes through. It's community-based intelligence. And we always encourage people to use it for whatever you see. You get reported to Crime Stoppers, and there is a process, and that information will always get graded and it'll get used if relevant. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Thwaites.
Thanks very much, and a great presentation. I mean, one of the things, and you know far better than I do, is trust in the police. It is always going to be an issue, especially where people feel easier reporting it to Facebook than they do to the police. One of the things you said in your opening statement was that you're a data-led person as well. And one of the things that I've seen has been pushed in other areas is that reporting things to 101 and things like that are things that will actually help you look at higher staffing numbers, where you put in those people. So part of it encouraging people to use that more rather than reporting it to Facebook, using your 101, bearing in mind the statement that this Councillor Lumley just made about the difficulty in doing that. But is that something that, as a council, that we should be looking at and helping with more?
We're really conscious that people have preferred ways of communicating, and we like to tap into every possible way. So we have beat surgeries for the people that want to see the police face to face. We have access to social media. All the information we get off social media and the various other platforms, I can't name them all. I'll go for Instagram as well, just to show I'm relatively with it. That's all channeled through to the same information centre, so it still gives us a pattern on behaviours, trends, and anything like that. And we now use this Microsoft Power BI that generates that information. It gives us data on crime hotspots and trends that we wouldn't necessarily see if we weren't really looking into the detail. So we just encourage any platform really, and of course with the partnership working, yes, absolutely, if it's antisocial behaviour, we're not the only channel, and we'll share the information when we get the information to the statutory partners if it's relevant to them. So we all have our preferences. In essence, I'm a face-to-face person myself, so I think if I'd always take the opportunity to go to a beat surgery, but we have the younger generation that absolutely swear by social media, and that's their way of communicating. Just for us as police, we just want to capture any way that the people want to speak to us. So that's how it works.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Cliff.
Yeah, something that you didn't cover specifically within your, I guess it comes under your rural crime heading, is fly tipping. And I just wondered whether you had any thoughts on anything else we could do as a council to support you in your efforts to combat persistent fly tippers or hotspots for fly tipping.
That's a good question. I think normally fly tipping is normally led by the Melton Borough Council, but obviously we're always happy to support and work with the council to. But I'll be honest with you, it's not an area of expertise for me.
Yes, obviously, Darren's right. It is the community safety team that deal with fly tipping, and we have lots of methods and ways of trying to catch fly tippers, sort of stuff. And we're going to talk about this later on in the report. But yeah, we kind of all up to date with that, and I'm sure we'll bring you up to speed as we get through. And if we don't, or there's something you're not quite sure, just ask at that point and we can reiterate that.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? It's the full set.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Darren. I live in the rural community, and I would just like to say in the last 3 years how it's improved tenfold with having beat officers there during the day, during the night. Really impressed with what I think it's Matt Holton. He's one that's steered it really, really well. And there's someone just left, haven't they?
We got Matt and Chris Vickers as well.
And there was someone before that, wasn't there?
Oh, that might have been slightly before my time, so
Yeah.
I don't know. But,
yeah, but they are very, very good on thing. But how many during the night? Is there a patrol that runs during the night around?
Dedicated to rural crime, no, but a lot of our officers based at Melton, our local officers, they are trained, wildlife trained as well, so they understand the impact around that. Hare coursing and plant theft and stuff. They're all very, very well briefed on it, and a lot of their downtime will be patrolling the rural villages and the rural locations as well as the town centre. So there is some coverage. It's probably not as overt as what the rural crime team can do for you, but obviously with just 2 officers, we are restricted on how far we can stretch them, so to speak. But I'm pleased that they have made that positive impact as well. I know Matt has got a good background in farming and agriculture himself. His dad used to be a PCSO who was really embedded in the farming community. So it's nice to hear that they're having a positive impact.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? If not, I have one. I've been sitting here pondering actually since Councillor Gordon made the comments, and I have to confess, my eldest son once fell foul of the police many years ago when he was a young teenager and was subject to one of the then cautions. He was quite good about it. I mean, he gave his details before he was asked, and went in front of the inspector, and when we finished, I said, well, I should tell you, I've taken his PlayStation away for 6 months. And the inspector looked at me ashen and said, that's a bit harsh. So I think, you can actually treat young people appropriately. I just wanted to ask you about retail crime. And of course, it kind of links into your reference to the dispersal orders that were instigated in the last couple of days, or the dispersal order. And part of that was about events happening in the retail outlets in that part of town. Is there any measurable increase in retail crime in Melton in recent times? I think we'll all be aware that nationally it's become a major issue.
There's some data I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not aware that there's been a spike in it. And of course, when we look at retail crime, and particularly if we focus on Melton on Melton town, the county lines and drug scene actually does impact on the retail crime. So the shoplifting is prevalent with drug users that are raising funds. So they'll attack the local retail outlets to fund their habits. So they kind of go hand in hand. If we've got high drug use in a town, we're going to have higher thefts because it'll be the drug users trying to fund the habit. So obviously that links into the priority of working to deal with that. But as I say, it's not just dealing with the criminal offences, but supporting them through potential rehabilitation, which is what we do as a partnership. And what the antisocial behaviour and the levels of antisocial behaviour the shops and the retail outlets have been exposed to this week was just totally unacceptable, and it's something that we'll be working really hard to drive down. The operation that's in place at the moment, it will be revamped. It'll be more fit for purpose because we simply can't have that. We have visitors to Melton that come here because it's a wonderful market town, and we have people that live here, residents that are getting very concerned. So that's our responsibility, and as a partnership to lower that down. So I will bring some data next time around retail and hopefully we'll have some good news for you that we are reducing the incidents.
For that, Darren. Councillor Gordon.
Yes, with you talking about shoplifting and that, I do know, because I've talked to people in the shopkeepers and that, the Leicester Mercury shop, they have to watch every time young people come in, and they do have a lot of incidents. And of course, their counter is at the top end of the shop instead of near the door, so it makes it a bit more difficult. But also Morrison's have a lot of problems as well, which I'm sure you know about. And so I just thought to just mention that there has, as I've been talking to people, and especially the security staff around there, because I know quite a few of them now, and they've said, how bad it can be. I just thought I'd mention that.
No, that's you're absolutely right, and we are really sort of we still prosecute shoplifting. People think it's a low level crime. Well, it's not. It drives the prices of products up for a start. And it's not very nice now, because I know the shopkeepers and the retailers, when they challenge people, they're very concerned about what response they're going to get. So there's a lot of retailers that are having no challenge policies to keep the staff safe, and it's just not nice. And that's something we'll be working towards, you know, in a town as sort of compact, a little market town like Melton. So
Okay, one more comment, Councillor.
Yeah, and I also am impressed as well with how the shopkeepers in the town deal with it. As soon as there's an incident, they let all the others know. And I think that is wonderful. Yeah, that's brilliant.
that's good to hear. I think they have a retail radio skill. I've not properly managed to have a chance to see how they operate, but I know through the CCTV and retail radio that they do communicate with each other, and it's really effective way of doing it. And of course, the best option is if we've got a police officer there as well, but we'll do our best.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Darren. Are there any other questions? Richard?
Was it £1 million worth of stolen equipment through the rural thing? Was it in 1 year or 3 years? And how much of that was returned?
Good question. I'm quite happy to take it away on how much of the property was returned. I believe it's over a 3-year period, so I'm gonna have to flick back through the notes. I'm sure it's a 3-year period. No, recovered in an 18-month period. Yeah, so I will take that away about how much of that property has actually been reunited with its original owners, and I'll let you know, because I'd be quite interested to see if we're managing to successfully do that, and actually how we advertise and let people know what we've got. So I will take that away.
Just one other question. When I said return, what's the sort of lengthy timescale of when an item's been recovered to an item's returned? Is there a timescale or not?
No, I think they'd look to return it as quickly as possible. What would probably have a significant influence on that is whether it's got any forensic value. So it might be that we've had somebody in custody, somebody we're looking to charge, and that item might need forensically examining or even sending away for DNA processing. So there are variants to it, but if it's not a part of an evidential chain in any court proceedings, you should be able to get the property back pretty quick.
Yeah, just in our ward that we had a fair few thefts, and a lot of them with Apple eye tags. So just to do the tracking on the system. So there was one lady, she'd lost something. I won't say what it is in case it's still running, but she'd lost something. It still hadn't been returned after, I think it was 4 months, but it was an ongoing thing that it was ruining her business. She couldn't. The insurance was unsure, or whether it weren't insured, but it was, she needed it back to keep the business going, which there was a detriment on that. And it was just I know a lot of the community are at my community that I know of are using different tagging systems to monitor their trailers and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And again, I think it goes down to individual cases, doesn't it? And we certainly don't want to be causing any disadvantage or any impact on victims any more than the actual original crime. But then unfortunately we've got processes and it's really important that we get these people convicted. So yes, it's impacted for that victim, but actually a successful prosecution and conviction could mean that there'll be numerous others that won't suffer that. So again, there are some variables to it. I do accept and I do understand the impact if it's a certain piece of property that's really, really important and to your business and the way what you do. If you can't get that property back in a period of time, I do understand that, but there's normally a very good reason for it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Obviously, if there are issues that arise after the further presentation, my voice is definitely going tonight, then feel free to chip in. Before I am losing my voice. This is weird.
Yeah. Aisha, would you like to continue with your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not going to be going through the report in great detail, as members will have copies of the report, but there'll be some key points and principles that I'll be drawing out. I was making some notes, Darren, as you were talking, and I'm really pleased that actually I've kind of noted some themes and principles that Darren's referred to that members hopefully will see resonate throughout this whole report, and that's around incremental approach, support versus enforcement, a values-led approach, but also not being afraid to use enforcement as deterrence as and when it's needed. So the first one is around the impact of the team restructure. There were 3 drivers basically to the team restructure and the realignment of the team. The first is the departure of key officers. The second was that we were increasingly seeing a lot of crossovers with the traditional ASB officer role. Sorry, I forgot to move on. There, and the neighbourhood support officer role. The old way basically encouraged, we felt, a lot more insular and silo-based working culture. We brought in environmental enforcement into the structure to provide the team with greater flexibility in using a range of both support and enforcement approaches. It is a small team. It consists of a strategic lead, unfortunately couldn't be here today, a partnership officer, the role which I'll cover later on in the report, and 2 safer communities and neighbourhood officers, which basically incorporates the previous 2 roles, plus environmental enforcement. And as I say, you will hear from them later on today. And just to say on this really, you will hear from Amelia and John, but in Melton, we're really, really proud of our approach to the balance that's needed on support versus enforcement. And that's also reflected in our wider integrated people offer, of which this team is quite an integral part of. So there are some case studies within the main body of the report. I'm not going to go through the enforcement actions in detail. They are included in the report, but I just want to bring in Amelia first and then John, just to talk through a couple of the examples that are contained within the report. Amelia, yeah, to go first.
Hello, everyone. So as Aisha said, we're just going to discuss some of the case studies so you have an idea of some of the things that we've been doing. So as you can see at the top, late last year, Melton Borough Council issued their first closure order, which was a partial closure order. And that was in partnership with our tenancy service team, case management team, and Melton Police. It was a really positive outcome as we looked at doing a partial closure in the end. What the positive outcome was is that the issues that were happening at the property, we had loud music, cannabis, smells of cannabis, fighting in the streets, people attending the property that weren't invited to attend the property. That stopped, and it was a really positive outcome as the individual stopped using drugs, started engaging with Turning Point, and since then we've not received any more complaints of antisocial behaviour. So it was a really good positive case study for our team. So that was a case study that I wanted to quickly talk about. And I'll just pass on to John as he has a case study that he would also like to speak about.
Hello, everybody. So I want to touch on the bit that sort of covers fly tipping and some of the other enforcement actions that we have been doing and undertaking, and it also incorporates the bottom one. So in relation to the bottom one, we undertook 2 stop and search operations with the Leicestershire and Rutland Police, and that is where we sort of get together and pick up a location that in both instances were quite rural. And the police go out and find vehicles that appear to be transporting waste and other items, and then they bring them back to where we're stationed with a police officer, and then we do all of our relevant checks to see if they are registered waste carriers and everything is legal. But also the police will give the vehicles a once over and give them advisories and things if the tires are not right or anything like that. Out of the 2, we've done it 2 times already, and we have some more further to plan in, but we did actually issue a fixed penalty notice for somebody that didn't have the right waste carrier's license or anything like that, and he was dealt with, and that was paid. But we found quite a high majority of the drivers we spoke to were registered, and actually we're glad that we're doing it, because it gave them some validation of why they were doing things like the right and above board way, if you know what I mean. So we think that's quite a success, and we have more of those planned in. And then the other thing I want to discuss is in relation to fly tipping. We investigated a fly tipping that was traced back to a business. And then that got us thinking about, are all the businesses aware of how they should and shouldn't be getting rid of their trade waste sort of thing, because that just can't go to the local amenity site. So that led us to literally splitting the town centre in half and going to liaise with businesses and shopkeepers over a couple of days. We originally spoke to 57 shops, and out of those 57, 20 shops proved to us they were getting rid of the waste that they were generating in the right way. And with the rest, with them written to make them aware of how they should be getting rid of the waste. And this is from an education approach first, because a lot of them go into a panic as soon as they get a letter and saying, am I in trouble? And this isn't the case at all. We're just trying to make sure that all the businesses dispose of their trade waste in the right way. And we've had quite a good follow-up. So there's actually 37 letters that were sent out to the businesses. There were 16 of those that have got back to us and proved that they are getting rid of the waste in the correct way. And then in the next up and coming weeks, we've got to do like another follow-up letter. And then it will only, after we've worked with them and the time period within that follow-up letter, then the only other way is then the enforcement bit will follow after that. But we will always come in at the very bottom level and follow in the incremental approach that Aisha stated. And we do offer to educate first. That is always the way. It's very rare we will just go and enforce straight away. We educate, and then enforce if there's no other way or people aren't conforming with really what we want them to do.
Thank you, John. So we just wanted them to talk through some of those case studies, because it really is a stark comparison to how we were working back in 2021. There's a lot more flexibility within the team. It's a very dynamic approach, a very flexible approach as well, in the way that they work. So just before I move on to the next one, I'm just going to take a pause. Any questions?
That's a shot.
Hi, John. You're using mobile CCTV at the moment to catch fly tipping. How has that gone? Has there been any prosecutions from using that at the moment?
There hasn't been any prosecutions as of such. We do have a designated camera that we do employ out in rural locations in an attempt to catch fly tippers, and I get that information not only from reports from the public, but we work closely with Waste Management to actually send the crews out to collect fly tipping, and they compile almost like a list of hotspots, if you want, where they say in this particular location, in that particular borough, we visited 12 times or something, and we kind of pick them off of that. I haven't managed to catch anybody fly tipping on the camera yet, but that doesn't stop us from continually deploying it in various locations for varying lengths of time. We do have currently a bid sat where we've applied for some more funding to actually get more of those cameras that are solar powered, meaning they could go out in more places for longer, if you know what I mean, with a view to that would increase the opportunities to catch them. We do go out and visit every fly tipping that's reported and look for evidence and as such, and we do both have case files that we are working on in relation to fly tipping, but we're not just quite at the prosecution point yet.
Thank you. I mean, I will actually just raise a point myself. I was going to raise it later, but on page 41 of the main report, that's just my way of showing I've read it. You more or less list what's here, which is the examples of enforcement actions taken. And I just made a note saying it'd be really good if we could have a broader sense of how many occasions we've not had to take enforcement action, i.e. we've engaged with whoever and achieved a result, because I think it puts that sort of in proportion. And in fact, you've partly answered that by referring to the 57 shops and the letters and the ongoing process. But I think it would be it would help put into context, not just listing how many successful enforcements we've had. And I think that is valuable, that we're now doing that, but that we've got a much wider range of activities that are getting good, positive outcomes without having to go down the enforcement route. So I don't know whether that data can be captured for future reports.
Thank you, Chair. We'll take that away, but I think also what John referred to is the areas that we have deployed the mobile CCTV. We haven't caught any fly tippers, and that kind of obviously demonstrates that it should be there as a deterrent as well. And I think I just want to refer to the C and D, which are 58 community protection warnings. I should go back really. 58 community protection warnings and then 19 community protection notices. Notices generally follow warnings. It's a third ratio, and that shows what an effective deterrent the warnings are as well. But certainly for future ones, I can go back and see what we can capture on that as well. Yep. So I think partnership working has actually been covered in quite some depth through Darren and the team as well. So I'm not proposing to go through any of that. The Safe Melton Partnership is sort of our main statutory strategic partnership. It is a statutory duty for local authorities, fire and rescue services, health services, police and probation services to work together. But we also have a wider partnership that consists of the VCS community, which helps us achieve a multi-agency and evidence-led approach to crime prevention and reduction. And the priorities that you heard Darren talk about earlier, the drugs, the county lines, ASB, enviro crime, rural hate crime and hate crime and violent crime are all have been emerging priorities that were agreed by the partner through a priority setting workshop at the Community Safety Partnerships. The Safe Communities and Partnership Officer, this one is a part funded role at the moment, currently part funded through the OPCC, but this is around recognising how really partnerships are key to our working together and developing collaborative approaches and engagement opportunities. Again, Darren's referred to us wanting to do a lot more of this. One of the key focus of the year has been to reinvigorate the SMART, which stands for Safer Melton Against Retail Theft. And obviously there were some GDPR concerns. I'm just going to bring in Amelia just to cover briefly what the DISC app that we achieved through funding is sought to achieve.
So we introduced the DISC app as we've already discussed, that the team was restructured, and one of the things that we identified was that the SMART scheme wasn't working for multiple reasons. The main reason being that it wasn't GDPR compliant. So previously the retail stores would report shop theft, obviously through the police, but also through the SMART scheme, by posting it on a Facebook group with an image of the perpetrator. And then they would fill out a paper report and hand it to the chair of the SMART group, SMART group or forum, yes. And then that would be handed through to the local authority, to the community safety team. That was not working, and like I said, it wasn't GDPR compliant. So we looked at alternative options, and other district councils were using the DISC app. So what happened was that we had a SMART meeting, and we suggested this to the group. And what it is, it's an app on the phone, on your smartphone, that all the members of the SMART group can join. And if there's an incident of shop theft, the retail store business or manager can report it directly through there, as well as obviously reporting it through to the police. The local police designated neighbourhood police officers also have access to this app, so they will be able to see when it's come through. It's made the reporting quicker for the local authority to react to, and we can now look at issuing perpetrators with community protection warnings to ban them from certain shops that are part of the scheme, which has been really successful so far. and we've also had increased engagement from businesses as well. I think that's kind of covered what we're looking at, yes.
Thanks, Amelia. And finally, just on partnerships, obviously there's a wide range of partnerships. Again, we have really covered quite a lot of that throughout the talk from Darren and the team as well. Just to mention our integrated people offer, it's an internal partnership. It's a very key part of our wider infrastructure of support. Obviously, at the moment, we're sometimes working with quite stretched resources, but there's a really positive culture of supporting each other where services overlap, and especially within the wider directorate, and whether that's undertaking joint patchworks or delivering diversionary activities. So there's a huge range of cross-cutting links that the Safe Communities team have with, for example, our community support hub, our tenancy services, environmental health teams, the healthy and active communities teams around delivering diversionary activities, housing options and waste, and as you heard from the examples about fly tipping as well. I'm just going to pause again before going on to funding opportunities. Any further questions?
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, it's about fly tipping. Now, if a business or a shop, whatever, sort of has a contractor and they don't quite know what happens to their waste once it's gone, hopefully it's gone to a good place, you know what I mean? And but they could fly tip it anywhere. Now, the person that hires them, are they responsible? Because obviously, you know, they've not gone through the whole system of it, if you like, with them to see what happens to the waste afterwards. Or is it the company that's doing it, that's collecting the waste, that would be in trouble for that?
In short, both. So as a householder and a business, you have something that you have to follow, which is your duty of care, which means you make the relevant checks to ensure your waste is going to the correct places to be disposed of. So either householder or business, if you don't make those checks, and you just pay a man in a van that you found on Facebook, you too are part of that fly tipping issue because you've not made those checks. But equally, if you can give us the details of who that person was that you passed the waste on to, we can then trace that and look to catch the actual fly tipper, if you know what I mean.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Just on the point that Marilyn was saying, that where does it say in any of the Melton Borough Council, it probably does, I haven't really taken note of, like Marilyn was saying, where do you get that information to the householders all the time to say, if you fly tip here or use the wrong contractor, you're liable? I haven't seen anything on my street or anything else like that, or properties. How can we get that across to the general public?
So we do have targeted weeks where we target certain things, like for our team, this week is hate crime week, and we try and make sort of knowledge more wider available. So when the week comes around that we perhaps focus on fly tipping, there will be posts on Facebook and things like that that we do share to try and make people more aware of their duty of care, whether it just be a householder or a business. But equally, sometimes as we deal and interact with public, we do give that message out as well. So if you say you was curious and didn't know what to do, you could ring up on the normal number and speak to one of us, and we'd be able to give you that advice over the telephone. Probably an action for us from this is if it's not on the webpage already, we could maybe just have a relook and then probably add it to that if it isn't. But I'm not aware if it is on our webpage or not.
Yeah, we can take that away, and as John says, we can take it away if it's not on there. It's probably a really good point that you've made, and we'll have a look at whether there's a way that we can incorporate it. But I do also want to say that I think it's not an extreme version where a fly tip is found and both the householder and the person responsible for fly tipping, as John says, there'll be due diligence. What the team would be looking for is, has the householder or the business done any due diligence checks as part of it? And if, like say, if they're prepared to cooperate, and then it's something that falls onto there. But I guess that kind of warning to say you both could be liable for that is a really good point that we can take away.
Yeah, because at the minute now there was talk of the Summerby refuge thing closing. So this fly tipping could get a lot worse. So it needs something putting out there, Facebook, flyers or something like that, that is stated, because with being a rural community, we get a lot of it all the time, and I see it all the time, have to dispose of it a lot of the time just to keep the costs down. But you can see what's going to start happening. It closing all, like eventually it'll be Lake Terrace and then everything else like that. A lot of folks depend on things like that.
I just wanted to add that we did have a fly tipping campaign earlier this year that was shared on social media through our Facebook and Instagram, which did share, obviously not on every single post it says that information, but it was shared, and we actually do have leaflets that we hand out during our engagement events that we do discuss with people about that issue. As you identified, not everybody knows that, but it is on our leaflets, and we do ask for it to be shared during our campaigns as well.
Okay, so moving on to funding opportunities, the Police and Crime Commissioner have changed the way in which community safety partnerships receive their funding allocations. So previously, we would just be given a stock pro rata amount, but now we need to actually bid for our allocations. We need to be able to demonstrate clear project proposals with measurable outcomes, timescales for delivery. We have seen a small increase in our provision allocation this year, and also the upgrading of our CCTV has opened up further opportunities to enhance our offer around our duty to prevent serious violence, which is a statutory duty, will be covered on later on in the paper, and under violence against women and girls. And as I say, this will become apparent as we go further into the report. So to date, we've successfully submitted 6 funding grants, circa 30,000. The Safer Communities and Partnership Office is part funded by that, the DISCAP, the Play Close CCTV. It's worth mentioning that the CCTV that we have has the ability to either rove, be on a roaming function, or focused in on a specific area. And very recently we had some feedback about some concerns at the skate park, and we actually requested that Harborough honed in on just that area for a short period of time, so it gives us that flexibility to work in that way. A help point and standard support package. So anybody that doesn't know what a help point is, it works in conjunction with existing cameras, and it enables, it's a very small box with an emergency button and a camera inside. It's normally strategically placed. We're looking at that being placed around the Tubes nightclub to help the nighttime economy. And where people feel unsafe, they can press that button, and it enables an immediate 2-way real-time conversation with the CCTV control room, and they can actually zoom in on that area and also request support on behalf of the person that feels intimidated or threatened in any way, and it would also help identify the perpetrator as well. Convex mirrors in some of our key areas. Again, these are going to be strategically placed in areas of dead spots, undercover walkways, and that helps us reduce unseen areas. And then coming up with the Christmas period coming up, a drink safe campaign. And hopefully through all of these, we want to be able to build some confidence within the borough that we're committed to making the borough a safer place for everybody. Safer Streets 5, John mentioned earlier some funding that we have bid for. Melton this year, under this round of Safer Streets, has been just one of 2 community safety partnerships within the LLR region to be selected for Safer Streets 5 funding. In consultation with our CSP partners, we have submitted our bid. We don't know yet if we have been successful, but if we are successful, the following projects are what we're looking to deliver over the next 18 months. solar lights at Play Close Park, additional CCTV cameras, plus 3 additional solar deployable cameras that will specifically target fly tipping within the borough, target hardening measures, Buddy by a third-party intervention service, and resources such as body cam, additional training and upskilling for the staff who obviously put themselves in sort of sometimes very uncomfortable positions as we're going along. So I'll pause again. Any questions around that?
Mr. Gordon.
Yeah, talking about convex mirrors, I think they're great. But I was wondering, would it be possible, it's on Dolby Road, and I think it's Hardtop Road. So it's that corner there. There is a wall, a garden wall, which is quite high. But when you want to cross that road, you either have to stand to see it coming down Hardtop Road, you have to stand a bit further round, but you can't see the Dolby Road side where the traffic could come. And if you want to see if there is, you've got to stand the other side to see if there's any traffic coming that way. In the meantime, a car could come down either way. And it is a bit harrowing when there's a lot of cars coming down Dolby Road, because it does make you feel very unsafe, because you're having to look this way, then you're having to move across this side to make sure no cars are turning round. So to cross that part there is quite harrowing. And obviously the mirror would have to be on this other side so that people can see. But that part of that road, and it's not just me that's saying it, other people have said that they feel quite unsafe. So I think a convex mirror there would be brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Chair. Yeah, just an issue that comes to me now and again, and I think other councillors and the MP as well, is that people speed along different roads around the borough, and I'm anti-draconian measures. I'm not, you know, for speed humps or anything like that. I think they cause more problems than that. But what is effective is those like speed sort of like flashing ometers that record your speed as you approach the side. And I think from feedback I've got from the public, they are quite good at trying to like be. I know a lot of the public say to me, certainly in the town area, that they all tend to be in our sort of countryside areas only. They're not in the town area, which is a shame. But I did have a conversation with Inspector Lindsay Magley-Harlands a couple of years ago. She said there wasn't any funding for it, but if we could look into possible funding for those, just in a few main roads around the town area which are particularly bad at speeding, that would be good if there's opportunity. Thank you.
Darren, is this something the police would be able to?
It's just to let you know, I went through all around the rings with Leicestershire County Council, Melton Police, Leicestershire Police, Melton Borough Council, and they all kept saying it isn't us. So that's the last few years. So that I just sort of gave up.
Brian.
I think you may find Leicestershire will say it is us, but we've got no money anymore. Any other questions on this part of the presentation?
And we can take those away as well. Yes, that's fine. So community cohesion and engagement, obviously community engagement, building relationships within the community, breaking down barriers, really key part of our structure and what we want to deliver. Like I say, that balance between support and enforcement, and the report does contain some examples of what we've delivered so far and a forward look of what we're looking to deliver as well. And then I just want to mention the recruitment of the community coordinator, Village and Town. That's a cross-directorate resource, but that's around supporting the Safer Communities team with rural engagement, because we know that increased rural engagement is something that members want to see as well. Am I okay to carry on for the final theme? Yep. So just going to talk very quickly on strategy and key performance indicators, the combination of statutory and non-statutory functions of the service. So some aspects of the service may not be explicitly statutory, but they are a key driver, or they're integral for us to discharge our statutory functions, which is why they've been included on here. We've got some key strategies that we're going to be working on over the coming months. Prevent strategy, hate crime, serious violence duty, and the safer community strategy refresh. A lot of these will be linked into and basically led by national strategies. So whenever the national strategy feeds down to county-wide level, we will be then linking our strategies with that as well. And in the same way, we're waiting for the county-wide safe communities refresh for us to be able to link into that and update ours as well. Just want to quickly cover community triggers. That's part of one of our statutory duties. Residents and businesses have a right to submit antisocial behaviour case reviews if they feel that the local authority, police or housing associations fail to take appropriate action to address their complaints. There is very, very specific criteria which is on there. It does sit within the safer communities. We're the single point of contact, or SPOC, for this process, and we liaise with all agencies involved to action that trigger. And we basically see this as an additional tool to increase our understanding and the effectiveness of our delivery, any lessons learned, and how we perform as a team as well. Sentinel, the ASB case management system, it was introduced about 12 years ago and used throughout the LLR partnership. Over the last few years, we found that it's become a really ineffective way of multi-agency case management. We've been in Melton, we've been an instigator of a request to review the Sentinel system and whether ask the question as to whether Sentinel continues to be an effective case management system. We're really pleased to report that as we instigated this review, we're a key part of the task group to look at other options. As part of that options appraisal, eSINs is a system that we use internally in Melton in a few of our teams, and this has been identified as a viable and suitable alternative to Sentinel. So it is currently in the process of being explored. And we hope that we're going to get a decision about the system early in the next year, with Melton having been that key driving force behind that change. And finally, just want to cover off key performance indicators and link it back to the discussion we had right early on. We talked about values and the culture and the balance that we want to achieve. Our key performance indicators have been reviewed recently to make sure they're reflective of the team's expanded remit, and making sure that we're capturing outputs. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but what you will notice is there's an increase in KPIs that are related to enforcement. However, we hold regular case reviews between team members and the strategic lead, but also the team members themselves are encouraged to case review, discuss complex cases, to make sure that they're sort of adding challenge and context and using the right approach, depending on the context of that situation. Case reviews are a very fundamental part of case management. It enables that peer-to-peer challenge. It protects the organisation. It protects the members of staff. It protects customers, the service users that are being case managed as well. And basically it ensures that we're achieving that right balance between support for underlying root causes and enforcement as a deterrent. So just before I go on to the Q&A, I didn't know whether, Michelle, you wanted to add anything further to that?
No, I think that's been really comprehensive. All I would add is just how incredibly proud I am of the team, and I think, you know, the passion and determination that goes into what you do every day. And, you know, I have the real privilege of hearing and seeing that every day. So thank you, you know, from the enforcement work, but right through to community reassurance and prevention. They're all really important parts. And I often joke with John that I see him on social media more than any of our other offices, but that's really important because I know that you're spending a lot of time as a team out in the community. So no, that's all, and we'll welcome any further questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Very comprehensive report. Councillor Lumley, you have something you want to ask?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. number one, I can't remember what it was. It's on my phone. Yeah, could you expand, Aisha, on the new eSINs IT software? What's it going to bring about for us? I did email an officer about this a few months back when I had a police meeting in the town centre, but just wanted to know more about it for all of us here, if you can. And then number two, you know, regarding, we've got a lot of these points that you've mentioned, which are really good, like these like community triggers, etc. From my point of view, just a member of the public, I wouldn't have known about community triggers, and I just wonder if we're able to advertise these a lot more to the public, because the average member of the public, if they've got a problem with crime, whatever, they just ring the police on, you know, if it's emergency 999 or 101, they don't think about what we do as a council. So if we could advertise these points a lot more, so the public can feel that as a council we are actually sort of like, you know, like liaising with the police and other organisations to try and reduce, you know, crime and antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
So eSINs, yeah, it stands for Empowering Communities. It's a sort of social enterprise that was developed about 7-8 years ago, I think. We started using it in the community support hub, which was then called Me and My Learning. We find it a really effective multi-agency case management tool. It has the ability not just for you to be able to case manage within your own service, but cross services as well. It's got the ability to interlink with other systems that the council might use, for example, Northgate. It also, it actually, outside of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, most of our neighbouring forces and local authorities actually use eSINs in place of Sentinel. Leicestershire haven't, and that's why I'm a big supporter and ambassador of eSINs. I get no commission for it, but it's really a fantastic tool, and we see the benefits of it, and we're really proud that we've been able to demonstrate that to the LLR partnership for Sentinel as well. In terms of how it works, as I say, it's case management, so you can record everything that you're doing with that person. It has the ability to lock down that case if it's a sensitive case, but it's also got the ability to be opened up as well. And if you find a case from a neighbouring authority that is using eSINs that moves into the Melton Borough, and when we add that person onto eSINs, it flags that it's got a record somewhere else, and that would help us going forward if it is adopted by the LLR partnership to look at the sort of things like county lines, help the police with those kind of things. It's cloud-based, so people can use it on the move, but it's got some very strict security elements to it as well. But I mean, we can do a more detailed, if you're really interested, I can talk to you in more detail outside of the meeting. But yeah, we're really, I'm a big ambassador, and I know the Safer Communities team is of the system as well. Just on the community triggers, you are absolutely right. It's been around, I believe, for quite a while, but it was never advertised. I'd like to think that we are advertising it well. We have got something on the website because we have seen an increase in community triggers. If you look at the figures, we've seen an increase in community triggers, and compared to it a couple of years ago, maybe there's 0. Now you can interpret that as actually we're failing in our duty. What I will say is actually we're being successful in getting the message out that we're actually, the community triggers is there as a tool as well.
Thank you. Any other questions that people want to ask? I know we've been asking as we go along, so we may have covered most of the ground. Okay. If not, I'd like to thank Aisha and Darren and Amelia and John very much for being here to help jointly present this report tonight. I've certainly found it extremely informative. I think it's always useful to unpick exactly the detail of how much work is going on. And I think we'd all agree this is an incredibly important area, because lots of the other things we do can be unpicked by a failure to have a safer community for us all to thrive in. So thank you very much. You're very welcome to stay to the bitter end, but I'm more than happy if you feel you could more usefully use your time. You to excuse yourselves now. Okay, now we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, which has been taken under urgent business. I was consulted by the Director for Housing and Communities, Michelle, regarding this matter, and felt it was appropriate that it was added to the agenda for tonight. It is an important matter. It's something that's going to be in the public domain, or already is, in effect, isn't it? And it was felt important that the committee had an early report on this matter. So I'll pass it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing us to have this on the agenda tonight. I just want to be really clear from the start that this is urgent because of the timing of the annual report for the Ombudsman, and not because of a service failure concern by the council. But I'm really grateful for bringing it to your attention as early as possible. So, as you'd expect of us as a council and as a landlord, we need to have a really clear arrangements in place for managing complaints, and doing so in a way that allows us to acknowledge and put things right where we might have got them wrong, and also make sure that we learn from any complaints or things that do go wrong, because they do from time to time, but that we learn from that as an organisation. We have a new complaints policy that was approved in February, and that was brought in line with a new complaints handling code from the Housing Ombudsman. And you, I'm sure, have seen an increased focus nationally on regulatory intervention from the in housing, but also in the strength of intervention and power that the Housing Ombudsman has. They really do take that role seriously, and it's one that we hugely respect. In terms of complaints as a council, we take those really seriously. You know, I've had many conversations with across the housing leadership team about what's happening, trends that we see. We have a staged process in terms of managing complaints. They start at stage 1. Somebody who's dissatisfied can take that a stage further, and if they remain dissatisfied, they can take that to the Housing Ombudsman. And the reality, as I hope you can see in the report, is very few cases make their way to the Ombudsman for this council. And in fact, in the period that we're talking about from this report, 4 complaints were determined by the Housing Ombudsman. The reason for bringing this to your attention is that every year the Housing Ombudsman publishes an annual report, and they talk there about trends across the whole housing sector. So how many complaints they've dealt with, and of those, how many have what they call maladministration. And that can range from communication challenges or a failure to respond to complaints in a timely way, through to severe and then to serious and then very severe maladministration. And there are different penalties and interventions that the Ombudsman can require. During the year 22-23, the Ombudsman considered 4 complaints that have been escalated about this council, and across those they made 10 findings, and of those, 5 of those were maladministration findings. And I want to be clear with the committee that amongst those there were some really positive findings as well, and in all of those cases those maladministration findings that we can reconcile are related to communication, and they predate our complaints policy that was updated. I wanted to bring it to your attention to make sure that we were open and transparent about the report, which is in the public domain and is linked in your report, but also just to make you aware that we are having some ongoing dialogue with the Ombudsman around the accuracy of some of the data, but nevertheless it's really important that you have that information. So what the report does is it does, to the best of our ability, reconcile the findings from the annual Ombudsman report with our own findings. We've not had a follow-up from the Ombudsman yet, just to double check all of those cases. And you'll see in the report there are a couple of anomalies that we are just checking. But I wanted to make sure that we were really upfront and honest about the findings, and happy to take any questions to feed those back to Cabinet. So that's all I'll say on that, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions that members of the committee wish to raise? Councillor Thwaites.
Yes, I mean, the privilege of reading this earlier, but because one of the things that where you're having problems in actually reconciling the complaints against the different complaint numbers or the references within those. Is that something we're certain that the complaints procedure now will eradicate, or was it a problem of the previous system? Because I mean, it is one of the general things, not just within housing, but across the council completely, is that the complaint system is difficult at times, and the numbering isn't always representative or follows through on a case management point of view. Is that something that we feel won't happen again in the future?
Thank you. No, it's a good question. So I'm not concerned about the accuracy or integrity of the data that we have included in the report around complaints that have been escalated to the Ombudsman. The anomaly arises in this instance because the number of cases that we consider were determined in that period differ to the number that the Ombudsman tells us. However, we had one particular case, as you'll see in the report, that was determined in a particular year, but went into a review and appeal process. So that it was then determined in the next financial year. That's the anomaly I'm talking about. And the letter from the Ombudsman identified a certain number of findings which differed to the report that was published. So when I talk about data reconciliation, that's what I want to check, the actual cases against our records. So I am confident, and outside of this council votes, I'm very happy to discuss any concerns with the wider process. But we introduced an improved tracking process last year for complaints, and that's working really effectively for us. And we are seeing those go all the way through the various stages. But as always, it's one of those areas we would always want to strengthen, because a positive complaints handling culture is absolutely critical to an organisation, not just in housing, but across the board. Thank you.
Further questions, Councillor Lumley?
Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, are there complaints from the Housing Ombudsman to Melton Borough Council? Are they regarding sort of like tenant sort of like expectation complaints, such as, for example, Councillor Carter raised his matter in his ward about the Bradgate flats, about expectation from tenants regarding windows, and they've gone to the Housing Ombudsman. I think Michelle knows what I mean, and then, or is it just an actual complaint regarding like poor quality work? So that's a key thing. Thank you.
So what happens with the Ombudsman, when they receive a complaint, they'll do a few things. First of all, they'll check that the tenant has either tried to use our complaints process or has used it and exhausted that process. They will then seek information, so all records relating to that complaint and the way in which that was handled. They will come to us for records from us as well. And if they've got any queries, they will speak to us and they'll speak to that tenant. So what they can do is to check what we should have done against what we did. And so, yes, they can work through tenant expectation challenges. So you will see in the 5.2, the table there, we'll talk about, for example, in the first complaint, service failure, and that related to communication and timeliness of communication. There's a learning point for us there, and that's something that we should address. You will also see in the table at 5.2.1 a particular complaint where the Ombudsman could see that, yes, there had been something that went wrong, but the way in which we had tried to put right was considered satisfactory. And so they felt that actually we'd already recognised and addressed that appropriately. So they look at all of those things, and ultimately what they will do is say to us, these things we think were fine, there's no further action required. These things you need to do X or Y. It might be make an apology, it might be have a look at that policy, it might be pay compensation. And they also make things called recommendations, where they might say, you might want to have a look at your policy in this regard. One of the changes that might come next year is as they make some further changes to the way in which complaints are managed by the Ombudsman, they can actually require policy changes and other changes of us also. So what would be regarded as a recommendation now might become statutory. But I hope that helps, Councillor Lumley. So they would definitely work through the nuance of each case individually.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak, and Michelle. Yeah, that's really good. Just on the point just of our complaints process at the council, I have to use a system now and again just so that it's actually logged as a complaint, and I know it's going to go to the relevant officer, because sometimes when you email the director or contact the relevant officer, they don't reply back. But just one example that I've put in recently, and I don't mean to use one specific example, but it's just how the process way it could be improved, is that I put a complaint into the complaints inbox about how it happens to be we've got an issue in a country park where there's flooding on the back of stuff like Redwood Avenue properties. It's quite severe, even worse tomorrow after the heavy rain tomorrow. Now I put the complaint at the end of September. Now what the officer does, I know the officer that they work in the complaints team, they've just passed it on to the team to hope that they reply back to me. but they don't, the officer in the complaints team don't, what's the word? Pick up the complaint to make sure that that person's had a reply back. That makes sense. So yeah, so that's just something we just need to work on. I think that could be why we may have gone over our timescales for complaints replies outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think there are a few different things in the mix there. So I'll try and respond to them. So the first is that we have separate processes responding to ward member inquiries. And I think that's been considered a service inquiry. But I accept that if you're not getting the response, we need to have a look at that outside of this. In terms of customer complaints, the complaints policy, and it has been checked by the Housing Ombudsman, is clear that where things are a service inquiry, they can be dealt with as such. But where they are an expression of dissatisfaction or that something has not been done as it should have been, they should be dealt with within certain timeframes as a complaint. And one of the examples in the report that I've shared with you is somebody that had expressed that they were dissatisfied with something and we had not accepted it as a complaint early enough. And actually we've changed that. You know, Ali's leadership with the team has made sure that it's in our interest to log it as a complaint and deal with it appropriately and have that accurate process. When we were drafting the report for this evening, I was talking to our performance team about ongoing improvements that we can make. And one of the things that they are recommending is that we look at where we say we will do certain things in response to a complaint, just having a better way of tracking that we do those things that we say that we were going to do. And that's sort of described by the Housing Ombudsman as a gold standard around how you would manage those complaints. So there are always things that we can improve, and I welcome the feedback, and it'd be something I'd like to pick up with you outside of the meeting, if that's okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Any further, Councillor Gordon?
Yes, it's to do with the compensation. Now, is the compensation just for damages, say to carpets, if it's to do with water or whatever? Or is it, or do you pay out for their inconvenience? I don't quite know how this works on that.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. So in terms of the Ombudsman requiring us to pay compensation, they will make an assessment of the level of, Ali might need to correct me on the wording, but it's inconvenience and distress caused. And so, you know, for example, I recall a case where we were required to pay £50 in compensation because we had a delay in responding to a person, and that caused them distress in the eyes of the Ombudsman. And there are certain criteria. And what we try to do is we take the Ombudsman's guidance when we resolve our complaints internally. So there are cases when Ali will authorise compensation before a case goes anywhere near the Ombudsman, and that's something they would take into consideration. But yeah, we look at each case on its individual merits. So.
Alison, do you want to add something?
I think just to add in support of what Michelle's saying, that on absolutely we've looked at the culture of how we approach complaints. So if people make a complaint, we don't need to see it as a negative thing. And if there's anything that implies it is a complaint, then that's how we'll handle it. And then on the other side, obviously, you've probably heard me and my colleagues talking to you about the role of the social housing regulator. And that is very much, again, about being open and transparent. And if people aren't happy, making it easy for them to raise those responses. And also really for there to be a duty on us to show how we responded and how we learnt. So it is about a different culture and approach to, you know, to making complaints that's coming at us through both the Ombudsman, but also the social housing regulator as well. And obviously I'm just sat here this evening because it's my service area, and just to give that assurance to Scrutiny about how seriously we do take this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Any other questions? Councillor Thwaites.
It doesn't directly go towards the housing, but maybe the complaints procedures is something we should consider for a future scrutiny.
I think that would be valuable. Any further questions that members want to ask? I have one very simple one. If somebody complains and we upheld their complaint, does it automatically stop, or can they still say, I'm not satisfied with how you've upheld my complaint, I'm still going to the Ombudsman? Yeah. Do we know if any of the ones that went to the Ombudsman fall into the category of people who we'd actually upheld their complaints?
Can I get back to you about that? Would that be okay? And I think just to say as well, another change is that people can go to the Ombudsman earlier as well in the process. They just need to come to us once. and then they can go to the Ombudsman. And also when Michelle and the team did a really good job of rewriting our complaints policy, one of the things that came out of that as well was also a reduction in the timescale that we have to respond. So it's about, you know, for us being very much on top of our complaints, and even better, reducing the number that come in. But then it can be seen as a positive thing if you're getting complaints, because it's looking at how you deliver service. So yeah, quite a lot of change there, but thank you.
Thank you for that, Alison. Well, I'm bound to actually observe that in the table on page 57, the total number of complaints 107, and we're talking about 4. You know, so just to give a bit of perspective here, that clearly we are acting on complaints, and the majority are not deemed to be justified. Are there any other observations or questions? I can see, just in case anybody else, Alan, that anyone wishes to raise. And Councillor Thwaites.
Well, no, it's just one thing that we mentioned before when we discussed it, and the fact that there was a certain amount of surprise that we were on this report because it didn't reach the normal threshold for coming onto the report. And the second part of that is, and it may depend on what happens at Cabinet, but how are we publicising this because I think it is a positive, you know, taking that point, there's 107 complaints, there's only 4 which seem to have needed handled better, which is actually a really good piece of news, and we should be doing that. So what is the next action going forward?
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, on our website, we publish our complaints policy. We also publish, as we're required to do, a self-assessment, which shows how we, adhere to the requirements. We will publish this annual Ombudsman report to our website, but we will do it with some context around the number of complaints we've dealt with in that period. Ali meets regularly with their housing leadership team with our tenant representative group. We'll discuss it there with them also, because it's really important we can have that open and honest conversation. In terms of the numbers, the reason we were surprised is the Ombudsman confirms that for where they've dealt with fewer than 5 cases, it's very difficult to draw meaningful conclusions from data. And we've had 4. So that's one of our queries, is just to, and I guess that's a caution I would exercise. But at the same time, I would not want to give any impression that we don't take those 4 seriously or the outcome of those seriously. So I hope that helps and reassures.
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, it's just a quick one. It's to do with sickness, and if that's a reason why the complaint hasn't been dealt with according to the timescale, does the Ombudsman, does he take account of that and act accordingly because of that?
So what the Ombudsman would say to us is, did you tell the tenant that you couldn't respond to their complaint in time in the right way? And what impact did that have on them? And that's something that Ali would manage as the AD for that service area. So we have had instances of staff sickness or staff workload being key pressures. And we've got a particular pressure in housing at the moment, with a number of complaints that are sitting at stage 1, which one officer is having to work their way through. And that needs to be a team effort, which I know is something we're doing now, all the time, looking at what's underneath these complaints, what's causing this. And something that I'll just draw your attention to in the report is there was one particular quarter last year when we saw a sudden spike in complaints, and we could see they were all linked back to a particular contract. And so we could go back to the contractor to say what's going on. And in the Ombudsman's eyes, any challenge or failure with the contractor is still our responsibility. So it's on us to go and have that conversation and help manage that. So all of those things come into it in terms of workload pressures, other partners, sickness, or whatever it might be.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much for that. I think it's very helpful that we had an early opportunity to see this and to understand the actions that have already been taken regarding complaints. Just final observation. I can't stop myself from making it, but presumably when it comes to complaints, there's nothing in here that indicates the nature. So a complaint about not having the letterbox replaced that's not dealt with properly would more or less attract the same attention with the Ombudsman as someone who said my heating broke down and wasn't repaired for 3 months. There's no distinction between seriousness, is there?
No, there's no category. Although obviously when the Ombudsman is looking at if they are going to make a decision, then obviously the level of, distress or disruption that the tenant faced would factor into his decisions. But equally, it factors into ours at stage one. And I think just to share just two really quick things. So with Michelle, we did a really good overhaul of our complaint system quite a while ago now, and we get really excellent support in terms of monitoring it and being chased so that we do everything we can to respond on time. And something that we brought in now is that when we get stage one and stage two, we actually phone or visit the person, because sometimes you can find that what they've actually written or might not actually be everything that they want to talk about. And just sometimes those really powerful words about how is it that I can put this right for you. So not trying to second guess, but to say, how is it that we can put this right is a really helpful process. And I hope that that shows to Scrutiny how seriously we take it, but how we are wanting to work with tenants and make repatriation and just resolve problems as best we can.
I think what you just said is extremely important, and I personally find that encouraging and reassuring in terms of the direction of travel. Yes, Councillor Good.
Yeah, what if the problem is the contractor? You've dealt with the problem, you've spoken to the person, and you've passed it on to the contractor, and it's the contractor that's at fault and doesn't get it done or doesn't do it right. So how would that fare?
So we are the landlord, and that responsibility falls to us. So it is our responsibility to manage the contractor effectively. And that's something that we are doing increasingly, because things do go wrong, and it's really important. We've had some particular challenges around contractors communicating with tenants. So we need to address that with them to make sure that we can put that right. But I remember going to a presentation with the Housing Ombudsman, who was very clear that that responsibility is still ours. And, and that's important that we remember that. Thank you.
So ditto housing complaints, ditto fly tipping. We are the responsible body, aren't we? Right. If there are no further questions or observations members wish to make, I'm going to declare the meeting closed. I thank everyone for their attendance, and in particular the officers and the public gallery over there. So good night.